Hello everybody! If you're watching this video, it means you are using internet, and if you are using internet, you probably could not miss any of these social media memes about what was your first video game console, what was your first game controller. And many people are going to answer that their first joypad was this thing, the Atari 640, which was released with the Atari 2600 game console. That's not actually the 2600, this is the 2600 Plus, recently released with the HDMI connector and thing, but for all intents and purposes, it looked exactly like that. Me, on the other hand, what I had was more like that. It's also 4 direction, but it's analog with a small button. And it came with this console, the Hanimex SD-070 TV game programmable. And honestly, if you look at both of them side by side, they both have a cartridge slot, they have switches. Both back in the days were using RF antenna output. And yeah, pretty much very similar systems. At least, it's what it looks like. And both were released in 1977 in the USA. But inside, they are very, very different. And just so you know, here are more or less the packaging. So that one has been repaired, but it's the original box. And that one is a box from the Atari 2600 Plus. The Atari VCS is much, much more powerful than the SD-070. So how does it happen that it's a Hanimex I got for Christmas instead of the Atari VCS? The reason is that these consoles, despite having been produced at the same time, did not arrive on the European market at the same time. One of the reasons is that most of the consoles were made in Japan and USA, which are countries where basically you have only one language, while to import to Europe you need to support a very large variety of languages. I mean, we have Italian, German, French, Scandinavian countries, etc. And we have different connectors. Not all countries were using the same power plugs. Typically the British were using the plugs with a built-in fuse, while the French were using something very similar to what we are using in Europe now, in most places. And there were also some difference in video format. Like USA and Japan were using some form of NTSC, most of Europe was using PAL, and France was using SECAM, which is a variant of PAL, which is not directly compatible. What that means is that there were a certain delay to adapt all these systems, and the Atari VCS, despite having been released in 1977 in the USA, did not make it to France until 4 years after, in 1981. Which means there were no other console on the market. So all these old SD-050 and SD-070 based machines were still selling, and you could find them in catalogs, in advertisements for Christmas, etc., etc. Which is why we had this console at Christmas with my sister. And you can see a photo here with where we are apparently playing Pong, or maybe the football game, which would be Supersportic, where you can see the very fabulously entertaining box. And by comparison, that's what you will have with the Atari 2600. With some graphics which are vastly different from what the game is, but yeah, same type of game. So, with console, we are using what we call Pong on a chip, and we have a few here. So, we have the AY3850, which is the very first of the series, the 8610, 8700, and 8605. And these numbers are important because they more or less match the naming convention of many of the game cartridge, like the PC505 contains the 05 chip. And what are these Pong on a chip? The original first consoles, if you look at the timeline, we are not using processors. Microprocessors were quite expensive when they got released, and they were not really usable in a large-scale chip product. And so the first console, like the Magnavox Odyssey, were basically, or the Atari Pong, were using hard-coded electronics made of discrete components to simulate the logic of a Pong system. It was relatively simple, you have 2 bats on a ball, so that was quite easy to replicate. But it was still quite a lot of components, which got expensive. So General Instrument made this A3 processor, which basically is an entire Pong on a chip. And you just add a few components, and you have an entire console. So the first Pong consoles, which don't have cartridges, they are very similar to the one I was showing you, except the AY chip is directly soldered on the circuit board, and they can only play these Pongs. On this next generation of consoles with a cartridge port, basically it's the same thing as the old ones, except the chip is removed and it's put in a cartridge. Which gives the illusion that you can extend the console by having more games later. Unfortunately, there were a grand total of 7 games made, well, maybe 8 if you count the first chip, and that's it. There were no other games made later. And the reason is that to create these components, basically you need electronicians, people who can make masks, which are going to be used as lithography to create processors. And you can't really simulate that. I mean, you can now in 2023, but back in 1976 and 77, when they were doing that, you could not really simulate it. So basically they were making logic blocks that they were connecting to them, and there were no actual programs. The entire game logic is made of simple tests, like if this counter, which is incremented every millisecond, reaches this value, then it means that you need to test if there is a collision, and the collision is just using some logic gate between the bat and the ball. It's very hard to develop. On the other hand, to make a game like that, it's just a standard programming, and you can even do it on an actual computer, and possibly test it and debugging it, and when you're happy, you can upload it on a cartridge, which makes it much easier, and any programmer could actually learn to make these programs. So after a few years, there were no way General Instrument could compete with programmers, and these systems were abandoned, and at some point General Instrument released their own processor, the CP1600 CPU, which was used in the Mattel Intellivision console released in 1979. By that time, Zilog, MOS, Motorola, etc. had already released a lot of processors. So the interesting thing with this PC 50X console is that there is a huge number of these. Because General Instrument, basically, on their Gemini brochure, released the entire schematics on the system, how to integrate this chip in a system. Many people just basically made their own variant of a console, just hook a bunch of switches, put the chip in it, and you get an entire system. So there are many models by Radofin, Grandstand, Hanimex, MBO Palladium, Poppy, Mark, Princetonic, and a dozen others. Some made it to Europe, some did not make it to Europe. If we look inside the Atari VCS, basically there are only 3 big components. There is a 6507 processor, which is a cut-down cheap version of the 6502, which has fewer address lines, so it cannot address as much memory, which is why the first batch of Atari cartridge were limited to 4 kilobytes. So inside this is a 4 kilobyte ROM or EPROM. But because this console was programmable and people learned, it stayed on the market for a very long time, which means that the price of everything shut down. So at some point they were either to make some 8 kilobyte, 16 kilobyte cartridges, which this console is not supposed to be able to use, but basically what they did is to use some banking system. So it always see only 4 kilobytes at a time, but can use different pages, which allows you to have a game split in multiple parts. Like you could have a nice intro, with a 4 kilobyte page, and then a first part of the game, which is another 4 kilobyte page, and some mini games, sections, etc., using another 4 kilobyte page, which made it possible to make much larger games. So that's the 6507. You have the 6532, which is called the Riot chip, which means RAM input-output on timer, which is the actual, it's a complementary chip to the 6508, which provides the 128 bytes. I'm not saying bytes, not kilobytes. It's a very small amount of memory, and it's also handling the digital part of the inputs. So when you are using that, you are using the Riot chip. But on the Atari VCS, you could also use these devices called the paddles, which were used for some of the tennis games, breakout, racing game, and there were also the light gun. And these are analog output, which are not handled by the Riot chip, they are handled by the TIA, which is a television interface adapter, which is the only chip made by Atari, which is really basically what the core of the Atari VCS is. The rest of the components are off the shelf, you can use them from anywhere. The TIA is the chip which handles analog inputs, but it's also in charge of basically generating the video display. Contrary to modern computers, there is no frame buffer, there is no image in memory, because there is only 128 bytes of RAM. So the processor basically needs to generate the picture all the time, and it synchronizes with the TIA to say, okay, I need to wait until the next line, and there is a specific instruction which stops the processor, and the TIA continue displaying the lines. And when it reaches this position, it unlocks the processor, and the processor can say, okay, now change the background color to red, and wait 10 cycles, and now start displaying the sprite. And that's how the games are made. Obviously, the programmer needs to have a very good knowledge of the way the CPU works, and the internal work, and the code needs to be very small and efficient, because the more compact and fast your code is, the more stuff you can put on the screen. If your code is slow, you will just basically be able to just display a bat on the ball. In this thing, the circuit board is much bigger than on the Atari. And the reason is the connector has many more pins, much more pins. The Atari VCS only have 24 pins on the connector. The 12 pins for the address bus, 8 pins of data, the power on the ground, while that one has basically pins for every single of the buttons, the reset switch, every of the control here, the joystick port, the light controller port, and that's it. Basically, it's just a docking station. There is no brain inside, there is no CPU, there is no video generation. There is a RF output with the encoder, but that's it. All the logic, all the brain is inside this chip. I put in the description a link on a blog, on a series of blog posts by Cole Johnson, who did a decapping on reverse engineering of the entire PC 505 game, including a simulator for PC, which is quite interesting. In theory, we should be able to make our own games by basically just handling the inputs and the outputs. The difficulty is you need to generate the entire video signal yourself. So you could probably do something like that with a Raspberry Pi or ESP32, and assuming you get all the voltage on frequency right, should be able to generate signals on the various elements, because The pinout has a different output for the background color, the bat, the ball, so different colors can be used. So ultimately, technically, you should be able to have red, green, blue, black and white. And it's just a video converter inside, so if you push signal faster, you should be able to have a higher resolution. So it's very probable that you could do something like 68 by 576, which is almost the maximum resolution of a CRT TV back in the days. And for the audio, I mean, it's just output signal directly to the speaker, so there is no reason you could not have a CD quality mono, because there is no digital encoder of any kind, it's just the speaker are directly connected. So here is what the two systems looks like side by side. So here we have the Hanimex console, which contrary to the Atari does not have the audio output on the video, so it has its own built-in speaker. So the cartridge, so the standard one, you can see with an explanation of each number indicating which game to play. And since it was kind of cumbersome, I did a tentative of what if we had some inlays, so you would know which game to play. The user manual, no, nothing special. Warranty, and a leaflet that explains which control maps to what depending on which version of the console, SD-05 or SD-07 to use. But they are the same consoles. And some small manual that explains how to use these holes here to adjust the analog position, because these things are more or less wobbly and they may change over time, so you need to adjust to make sure the horizontal and vertical position is correct. And then we have the games. So I don't have them all in box, but here we have the car race, PC 504, shooting gallery, and Supersportic. So here we have PC 501, motorcycle, PC 502. One thing to notice is that the game is actually brutally honest in how it looks like. It actually looks like that. So you are driving a bike, and you have to jump over buses or jump over small obstacles. And here you have the combo, the enduro, with the obstacles and jump over the buses. That one, PC 504. So you may notice we are going from 502 to 504 because I don't have PC 503, which is a Panzer game, which is supposed to be the better available. It's very, very hard to find. This car race game is terrible. Basically, there are only two positions, left and right, but it has 2-player mode and 1-player mode. Here we have submarine, which have a bunch of variants. Basically, you have a destroyer in the center, a cargo ship on a submarine, and depending on which game mode you are, you need to protect the cargo ship or the submarine while shooting at the other. Then we have PC 506, Superbwipeout, which actually is a breakout type game, which I think of all the games I tried is probably the best one. Shooting gallery, which unfortunately only works with the light gun, but the light gun, I did not manage to get it to work with any of my CRT screens. The documentation mentions some adapter, depending if you are too far, too close, or if it's a TV black and white or color. So it looks like back in the days already, 45 years ago, that was not very reliable. And then we have the Atari VCS, which also have switches for difficulty and things like that on the back. The good old CX40, which is more iconic than it is comfortable. And people are complaining about how stiff it is now, pretending that they were better back in the days. I had a friend who had one. I always found this joystick terrible. But it is standard, which means if you don't like it, you can replace it by the arcade, which also has the same connector, or you can use one of these RetroPad, which has been modified from NES to use the same connector, or you can use the Competition Pro, etc., etc. And then there are the games. So that one is an original Atari game from back in the day, so basketball, with a box here, which is a bit tired. And that's probably the closest type of game from what you could find there. These two are compilations of old games which have been put for sale new, and you need to use deep switches to select which game you want. So put up and down to get video pinball, etc., etc. And then you have interesting stuff, like that one. So this is Donkey Kong, the real Donkey Kong, licensed from Nintendo, and made by Coleco. To run on an Atari console. That's from before Nintendo had a presence in the USA. Yeah, not everybody was trying hard to protect their intellectual property. So yeah, I like the concept. There is also a Mario Bros. Game. Then we have Frogger. So that one is losing the sticker. From Parker Brothers. And officially licensed from Sega Enterprise. And honestly, it's not the best Frogger I have ever played. And then two other games, which I have not actually opened. So, okay, let's do an unboxing. So that one is Space Attack from Mattel Electronics. So the problem with the original shrink wrap games under the sale on the Atari ST is that the shrink wrapping tends to contract over time to the point where it actually damages the content. So it's not a good idea to keep them shrink wrapped. So try to make it compressed. So we got Space Attack, Mattel, in a very weird shape. And we have a 90 days limited warranty, instruction, one player with computer, winning tips, etc., how to play. And now, Galaxian. Wow, there is a shiny Atari seal logo. So, how am I supposed to open that? Were they actually sealed like that? So, nice box. Managed to damage it too much. Cartridge. Galaxian, the arcade classic. Copyright 1983. In many different languages. So I guess now we can try some games. So let's try these games. Starting with Supersportic. So here I have the left pedal, gauche. That one is right. This game is squash. So the main problem with this thing is that they are super sensitive. And it takes a lot of time to get used to it. And you can see the ball change color every time one of the players touch it. And when it reaches 15, this is the end of the game. Then we have hockey, ice hockey, which is, wow. You have a goalie and you have an attacker, and you have to reach, yay, 1 point. And of course it's a two-player game, so if you're alone, and yeah. Then we have number 3, which is a good old standard Pong. Number 4, which is a shooting game. So that one I never really understood how it works. I believe there is something, yeah. So it's one of the things with these games that there is a bunch of switches for the difficulty, and yeah, so you can have an handicap on the player, so like your target is smaller. And you have that in the other game as well. So the single player target system. Now we have a basketball. As you can see, we can also reduce the size. And then we have basically what they assume is a version of Babyfoot. You can see it's a very exciting game. Come on. Yay! And then we have the two training modes. So for some reason, you have to use the right joystick on that one. So that you practice basketball. Also, something I need to mention is that the game is harder to play than it used to, because I had to use RF to HDMI box, which a cheap AliExpress thing which had some noticeable latency. The games are actually easier on the CRT. And then we have the squash training, which is basically a single player Pong. Then we have PC 502, motorcycle, with stunt cycle, motocross, drag race, and enduro. So the concept of this game is kind of special. So you use down to speed and up to brake. And at the bottom you have buses. You need to go fast enough to jump over the buses, but not too fast that you're actually falling down. And now there is one more bus. And the trick is to recognize the speed with the sound. Yeah, too short. So that's stunt cycle. Then we have motocross, where you have a small obstacle. So here, basically, you need to do some wheelies. And you get a time at the end. And if you don't do that, then you just crash. Then we have Drag Race. And finally we have Enduro, which is a mix of both. And this is the worst of all the games, the worst racing game of the whole universe, with a 2-player version and single-player version, but it's basically the same game. So I'm going to do 1-player game. So set. All you have to do is left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. Yeah. And it gets faster each time. And that's it. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. There you go, the shortest racing game of the whole universe. Submarine, PC 505. So you can control the destroyer and drop a mine. And the other player control the submarine and try to shoot so the second player managed to sink the ship. So the first player just drop a mine for submarine. Yay, won! Submarine, number 10. So on that one you play submarine and the computer try to destroy you. This is actually very hard. So that's submarine, which has some space variant. So then we have what I think is the best of all, that basically Breakout. On that one has some single player mode. So here it's important to set the difficulty to something okay. It is quite difficult. So this is a 2-player mode. So speed started quite high. So you need to, it's a bit like your warlord basically, but much harder. One of the difficulties is that there is no end position, so your bat can go out of the screen. So it's very easy to overshoot the movement. Yay, I won. So that one was supposed the single player version. So let's try. Well, at least one thing we can say is that this console runs at full frame. It's not 30 FPS game. So what's interesting is that there are some variants for these games. So here you have all the bricks on the right side, but there are other game modes where they actually spread the bricks over all the screen. There is the same number of bricks, but the layout is totally different. And as you can see, the game does not reset between the game mode. So you can see that the wall is the same. Now I can reset. Last one. So I guess we know that there is actually 48 bricks. And now it does not stop, so I'm not sure what the end condition is. And there are of course variants for 2 players. So I reset. There. I think that was the last game for that one. Finally, shooting gallery, which we can't play since we don't have the rifle. So basically that one is just... So, that was all for the TV game programmable SD-070. I guess I'm going to show the VCS while I'm at it, so we can compare the games since the two consoles are from the same year. So these are the 10 games in one cartridge that came with the console. And I believe the selected game is Video Pinball. Yes, so game reset. And I'm terrible at all these games, so... So you can do that to go on the left flip, that one for the right flip, up for both flips at the same time. And I lost. So contrary to the original console, that one supports hot swap. So combat, one down, all the up. I believe it's what PC503 tank will look like, but with mines. So, I know there are variants of the game, but the main frame of this console is that they release a cartridge without the documentation. So if you don't know the game already, it's very hard to know African variants. So anyway, these are the standard game. There is Adventure, Combat, Dodge Jam, Haunted House, Maze Craze, Missile Command, Real Sport Volleyball, Surround, Video Pinball. Oh, let's try, Real Sport Volleyball. How does it compare to the sport game on the other console? Okay, that seems better. It's very hard. Okay, I'm a terrible player. So, let's try Frogger. That's better. Looks like it crashed. Let's try basketball. Yay! Yeah, so alone it's not particularly funny. Let's try Donkey Kong. It's very difficult to align with the ladder. It's Donkey Kong, it works. I think this joystick is way too stiff. Let's try Space Attack. I have no idea what I'm doing. Let's try Galaxian. Yay! I guess that game definitely shows that there is more gameplay on the VCS. On a nice title screen. So yeah, there you go. 1977, both consoles, a vastly different type of game. I will try to find the PC 503 tank. And I will try to see if I can make my own game for this old console. That would be funny. So yeah, there you go. And hope everybody had a nice winter break. Bye bye.